guess we can get started. We have a lot of folks already, and I think people will trickle in, but we can get started. We have a quick agenda. We have two folks giving presentations today. One of them is the newly released Dolt integration with Flyte, and Max is here from Dolt Hub, and he's going to talk about the integration and how they see he can improve the community. And the second one is a guest presentation. Luciano, a quick background on that. Luciano works at IBM. He'll not sure if he leads, but it works on the Elira project. And in the past, we've had a chat about integration of Flyte and Elira. So I'll let Luciano, explain how Elira works, and then we can see as a community if there are volunteers who can help drive that project. A quick note: today is the first of the month. We usually do a release by end of the month. This was a long weekend, and we did discover a small bug yesterday, so we are pausing the release. We're delaying the release by a day or two, but keep you posted on the Slack channel and the Twitter and all that with the new release coming. There's a lot of new interesting stuff coming in the new release, so stay tuned. But let's get started. Max, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for the warm introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Max. I'm a software engineer at Dolt Hub. So I'm just going to share my screen now. See if I can get this to work. Apologize, moving a little bit slowly this morning. So I had a great long weekend. So thanks. First of all, thanks for the Flyte team. They've been very patient with letting me contribute and teaching me about their project. Let's see. Can you guys all see the presentation? Cool. So I've left this a little open-ended. I can go longer on some areas and shorter in other areas. I'm planning on giving a little plug for myself in Dolt, just 30 seconds. I have a demo of some of the FlyteSnacks that we contributed as part of our plugin. So just walking through a very simple case of how you would implement the Flyte Dolt plugin. And then I have a few slides describing some of the architectural principles of how Dolt does data versioning. We don't have to go super in depth into those, but I have them in case that is something that you guys would find helpful as context around why you would use this plugin. So, if anyone has questions, feel free to interrupt me. If I can go into several demos instead of just one of the simple demos, I can, curtail the architectural discussion at the end, make it as long as is useful or interesting to you guys. Just really let me know. Dolt. So I guess first, quick plug on myself. I think I have a really fun job. I get to work on integrations. So Dolt is a database company. We have a lot of people work on the core database. I contribute features to the core database. But the best part of my job is I get to work with people like the Flyte team, and I get to build integrations in the ML tooling space. So if anyone wants to ask me questions about that, anyone has suggestions for integrations, asking about the Flyte one, or you work at a company and you'd be interested in working with us, I'm on the Flyte Slack. We also have a Dolt Discord. We're very responsive. Feel free to reach out if anyone wants to. Sorry, I got to do that. So Dolt is it's a SQL database with Git versioning. It's very unlike other version control technologies. It doesn't store CSVs. It doesn't store these like column ordered files like parquets. It really stores data in a way unique to allow Git features. That sort of makes sense. So you can do really efficient diffs, branches, and merges on data stored in Dolt, which is structured very similarly to a B tree, which means that we've made the query engine wire compatible with MySQL. So you can drop Dolt anywhere you would use MySQL, and you can get the same features, but you can also get all of the Git features because of the way that we've architected our database. so some reasons why you might use this. A big one is iteration and experimentation of ML workflows. If you are training a model or you are doing any data work where you care about maybe the differences of data quality or processing steps, or you want to view the difference of outputs. Data diffing is a big use case that we see from our customers. Another one is data sharing and collaboration, which is going to be a subset of data ingestion as a whole. We have a lot of customers that have disparate data sources, real estate, finance, bio, and those data sets aren't always standardized, or they might come out in like quarterly segments. And Dolt is a very efficient way to have many people generally collaborate on the same database, because you can have people tweak a database and then commit small differences to a central repository. But you can also, for example, have real estate listings that are coming out on a quarterly basis, and you can merge those incremental changes to your core data warehouse with the difference and lineage of those sort of updated over time, if that sort of makes sense. So I can talk again about more use cases, but this is just my overall quick plug of like why you would use Dolt. So last time I was here, I was talking about our SQL Alchemy plugin. As I've already alluded to, so one way of using Dolt is like using any other SQL database. It's drop-in MySQL compatible. So we built an SQL Alchemy task in Flask where you can plug in a connection string to your Postgres, to your MySQL database, any RDS instance, or Dolt. So what's different about the Dolt specific plugin is that we are really exposing the version control features in Dolt, so we have to do a little bit more work to expose that configuration. So I'm going to jump into a demo. Can you guys see screen changes when I move to Van? Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm going to walk through a very simple example first. Let me move my little dialog box out of the way so I can see. Okay, so we have a simple workflow here where we are, so what we're going to do is we are going to populate our database with a data frame, and then we're going to read a data frame. So it's really just like a write-read operation, and it's parameterized by a single integer that is going to affect the count column. So it's supposed to just be like a very simple example of how one would use Dolt. And so the way that we're writing data to our Dolt database is through this configuration. So one way of using Dolt is through an SQL string. Another way is just through a folder path. So locally, we have a foo folder here, and in that, we are storing the entire contents of our database. Very similar to how you would use SQLite. These are files just stored on our file system. So I'm going to run this, and I'm going to run it with two different arguments. And what's going to happen is we're just going to populate this database with different count versions for these different names. And it's probably going to show up in my history, but OK. And I have this already populated. So we're going to run this. We're going to create our data frame. We're going to write it, and then we're going to read it. I'm going to run this twice. And these counts are just going to be twice as big in the second example. And so all we've really done in this case is write a data frame to Dolt and read it back. It's not the most useful example, but it is very simple, and it shows like the simplest way that you would integrate. And what we've done is that on the Dolt side, we have recorded the two different states of this operation. So if we, let's see, so if we log this, we have these two different commits, which are the two different versions of the database. And I've taken the difference between them here. The difference is not super useful because we're keying this table on both of these values. So there's no primary key. But this is just a very simple example of we have our Dolt database. We have our Flyte workflow that's going to make some writes and commit those writes in their own commits. And we're taking the difference between those two commits here. So a very simple example, but this is, I guess, the simplest example that I could make of integrating Dolt with Flyte. I do have more complicated examples if you guys would be interested in seeing those. Or I can walk through a little bit of the specifics of Dolt that actually make that possible. I guess, Ketan, do you have any recommendations on timing, or I don't know, do you have
Yeah.
suggestions?
So we do have more time allotted to you. Definitely walk through. I think just for folks to, I think, follow what you just showed. So Dolt is, think about it as an external database. What Max did is model it as a type, essentially a Dolt table. And as he ran a task and it completed, it automatically inserted that data into the database and as a different version. And it did not affect, like, it's completely immutable. So all the old data exists and all the new data exists. And there's a diff, a natural diff. I think this is extremely useful for cases in which you're trying out new hyperparameters or trying out new data sets for training a model or so on. Um, and Dolt is available like a service also, right? But this can use your local copy or can use any other MySQL. Is that right? Oh, I don't know that part. Maybe you need to explain.
Yeah. So the remote as a service right now is a product. So we have Dolt Hub, which is just a way of storing your databases in a remote. Another way of storing your remote would be putting in an S3 bucket or a GCP bucket as, like a central repository. So like your entire team can all reference the same version. So Dolt Hub is an easy way to all reference the same version with having a UI around inspecting your data and mutating your data. I guess I could show that too, but it's just a little UI. We can like run SQL queries. You can see information about the schemas, and the schema changes over time. Yeah, and if we get big enough, then we would make something that basically scales similarly to like Snowflake or Databricks. It just stores data in a very different way. It's not storing data as like CSVs or parquets, storing data in I guess, if I get into the architectural discussion, it stores data in this way that's very complementary to horizontal scaling, but also these sort of identifying structural sharing within those chunks of that data.
Yeah, so I think it would be, at least for me, it would be really useful to look at some bits of the architecture, especially because when you did the Dolt diff, that was really quick. Is that really quick because the data set was small, or is that really, that's how it works as the data set scales?
It is partially quick because the data set is 3 rows, but it's also log n efficient in the way that we're storing data. Because, yeah, maybe I can give like a high level overview of this. So I'll try to keep this to a couple minutes. I have given this talk in the past and it's like 10 minutes full. But so Dolt is stored as a Prolly tree. So it's very similar to a B tree. We have tuples on the bottom, ordered by primary key. We are sectioning off the data, and we have child nodes, we have parent nodes, and at the very top we have a root of our database, with two main differences between Dolt and a B tree. The first is that we are splitting up these data not by fixed size widths, but we're splitting them up by the contents of the data. So we look for unique rare events in these tuples, and that is how we're splitting up the tree. And what that means is that you sort of have these sticky boundaries on the data. And the best way, so I can go into this for a couple minutes, but in a B tree, what happens is inserts in a different order will create a different physical structure of the B tree. When you are chopping up the data by the content of the data, inserts in any order create the exact same database. So that's really important for Dolt, because if you build a database in a different order, two people separately, you want the same database to have no diff in Dolt. And that is partially true, that is true partially because of the way that we're chopping up this data. The second difference is that you will notice that we are not referencing child nodes by primary key. We are referencing child nodes by the content addressed hash of that child. And what that means is that when we do things like diffs, at the very root node, we can quickly identify whole subsections of the tree that have not changed between two commits or between two of whatever you're diffing. And that means that it's about as efficient as a way you can of diffing two databases, because we're not storing like the minimum information delta between two tables. We're storing, basically you have to make new of these chunks every single time, but it's a very small overhead when you're making mutations, because you're only changing one of these. So you're basically writing a new one of these chunks. And then when you take the difference, you only have to traverse the tree down through the path to reach those different chunks. So that is like I have many slides to describe this in detail, but that's like the minute version of like Dolt's architecture, which I can go into more or less as is useful for you guys.
Maybe a quick question. So essentially, you hash at the point of write and some sort of hash, and
Yeah,
that's what the structure. And so that's why the structure matters, because if the hash does, like, if you break it up differently, then the hash will change, and so
yeah,
you can't do a diff fast enough. Is that right?
yeah. We store it. We borrow a lot of concepts from Git. So in the process of making a commit, you have your working branch, which is the state of the database at any given time. You have a staging index, which is what is committed and what is like ready to initiate a commit. And then you have head, which is the most recent commit. So we borrow all of Git's terminology as a reference of how to like organize thought patterns around changes of a database. And the difference between those is really additional chunks. So if you change this data, you're creating new of these chunks. So then like if you make a new chunk, then the working root now is different, and it references not only all the old chunks, but it also references the new chunk. And that's how it's different from the last one. So then if you stage that, you commit that, you've created a new commit that encapsulates all of those references, which includes, right, the root hash being different because there was a change in one of its children.
Copy on write style, but awesome. Yeah, I would be very much interested, but we should do this separately, like essentially how do you resolve conflicts and so on. But if anybody else has any questions. Nope. Awesome. Thank you, Max. And so a quick note on the availability of this plugin. This will be available with the 0.14 release. Even though it's not tied really to the release, it can be our current release process releases plugins when the entire Flyte kit is released. So it should be coming soon in the next couple of days. It's been wonderful to work with Dolt, just an amazing contributor and super easy collaborator.
Yeah, you guys have been awesome to work with too. I appreciate it.